A bit.
All right, guys, we are rolling live, and I'm here with obviously Shane and Jim. It's BB, right?
Correct. Yeah, Jim Beebe.
Okay,
Yep.
right on. And we were actually talking earlier today. Jim's Jim. That's a tongue twister. Jim's Jim jumped on the conjugate programming that we offer through Wodify. And to my understanding, you've been running conjugate in your gym for a number of years.
Quite a few, honestly. We since we had Shane at our seminar, since that happened, my wife and I overhauled the programming, I don't know, 8+ years ago, and been running conjugate for our strength athletes, our student athletes, and mostly for our CrossFitters or our functional fitness athletes, our version of that. So we've been doing it for quite a while.
That's awesome. And when we were talking earlier today, it seems like you got a pretty good understanding of the conjugate system. Obviously, you've been programming it for a while. We were primarily talking about a way to communicate that to your coaches, other coaches who may be interested in the program. And that's
Sure.
how all this kind of came to be. I think you said it. You were like, "Hey, is this recorded somewhere?" And I was like, "No, it probably should be." That's
Yeah.
kind of how we got to this point. What I'd like to do, Shane, if you're cool with it, kind of talk about the West Side style programming that you came up with and how that's evolved into what we have now, and then I can kind of go a little deeper on that if you want.
Cool. Yeah, it's good for people to understand like kind of philosophy and where this comes from and the mindset of it, right? So, if you look at Westside Barbell, Westside Barbell developed a system, and I don't want to say just for powerlifters because it was for strength athletes. You can use it for strongman, you can use it for CrossFit athletes, you can use it for sprinters. You know, there's things you modify obviously, but it's all in the programming. But the idea of the programming is that every particular strength that type of athlete needs will be trained within a 3 week period, and for most sports, it'll be trained within a 1 week period. The reason why this is important is because if you don't train a particular strength for 3 weeks or more, you will lose up to 15% or more of the capacity of that type of strength. Okay? So we take a look at what strengths are needed for that sport, and we touch upon those all, like I said, within 3 weeks. Sport of powerlifting, Olympic lifting will all happen within a week. Um, and that is unlike any other system in the world. Which you usually have in systems worldwide, or like block periodization, we'll take as an example, is that we have block phases of different types of training. So, for example, you would have like a GPP phase, general physical preparedness. This is what you'll start off with in about everything. You need a certain level of conditioning to do more specific strengths training, right? So if you want to be a World Cup soccer player, your GPP has to be high enough to train the technique work and all the other skill sets at a high enough level to make it to World Cup soccer. If your GPP is not there, you're not going to be able to train at a high enough level, recover fast enough, and so on. So, what a lot of groups will do is they'll train GPP for a time period. Let's say 4 week block. It'd be longer than that, but let's say a 4 week block. And then if we need to increase speed, we can go into a speed phase, a dynamic effort phase, and we try to increase our force rate production, how fast we get to our force output, how strong our absolute strength, or we train different types of speeds depending on the speed of the sport. Okay, all sports have a slightly different speed. We'd train that for that type of sport. Then we would go into a 4 week block of a max effort phase to increase our absolute strength. And then we would have a 4 week block of a sports specificity phase. The problem with training like this is once you're 3 weeks past your GPP phase and your dynamic phase, you've lost roughly 15% of your general physical preparedness, your conditioning. Once you're past 3 weeks in your max effort phase, you've lost 15% or more capacity on our dynamic work, even more of your GPP phase. So what you're doing is you're exchanging different types of strengths. Problem with that when you're in a max effort phase is you don't want to be out of shape when you're doing max effort work. That's how you get hurt. Okay? If you're fatigued, it's like watch a fighter. You have a fighter with phenomenal technique. But even the best fighters in the world, if they're so fatigued enough, they start to drop their hands, they start to go flat-footed. And this is the best in the world that can, when they have their conditioning's on point or before they get worn out, their technique is flawless. Okay, so you can imagine someone who already doesn't have flawless technique, it's going to break down even faster. All right, so uh, we don't do that. We didn't do that at Westside Barbell. We have a dynamic effort phase every week. This is to train a particular strength that we needed for us for the sport of powerlifting. We chose an optimal strength, like a speed strength, and which also we would do strength speed, which is a slow speed. We will do a max effort phase for our absolute strength. And then on our dynamic days, we do 30-second rest periods, which helps with our conditioning phase for meets so that we're strong by the time we get to deadlift. We would have 2 special exercise days where we do sled work in those days, and that would also help with our conditioning as well. So we would train every particular type of strength we needed. Now we would do the repetition method for special exercises. And I call them special exercises. A lot of people call them accessories. A lot of people think of them as like bodybuilding exercises, like, oh, I'm doing stiff-legged deadlifts or glute ham raises or tricep extensions. I call them special exercises. We look at them a little bit differently. Okay, it's not just for muscle mass. Sometimes it is. We might need to increase muscle mass to optimize our leverage. We might need to put muscular endurance in those muscle groups. We might need to increase our strength. But we pick exercises and body parts to get someone to move perfectly for their sport. Okay, so like if I see someone walk by and their toes are pointed out, I know they have weak glutes. So I don't want that athlete to have weak glutes, so we'll put glute work in for that. Basically, what we're doing is we want an athlete to move perfectly. And the problem that we see when we're working with coaches is, and Jim, knows this, this, we all start at different levels. Like I am not anywhere near where I was at my first year as a coach. And everybody's at different phases of their journey at different times. So sometimes when we get someone new, we'd see a coach that has a lot of potential, we take them in, but they don't have necessarily the knowledge base, that we have. And one of the problems that I see with coaches when I would go to a lot of CrossFit gyms, and I'm not picking a CrossFit, I do seminars for years for CrossFit, is that people want to only cue out a problem. And a lot of times we can fix technique with cues and having the right cue for the problem, but I would go into a course, and I'll use this as an example, and sometimes I'd go in and they would have an early class before the courses start. And they would, I'd walk in, I just watch the class. I like to see people move so I know what the strengths and weaknesses of that gym are, and what's important to them. And sometimes, you see this person who maybe one person in the corner is hitting clean and jerk and they're pretty strong, and I see another person in the back and their knees are caving in on a squat and it looks like they're about to die, And the coach will say, oh, don't pay attention to them. I've been telling that guy for a year and a half to keep his knees out and he won't listen. So-and-so just clean and jerk this. They always want to show you the strongest athlete, right? And I was like, so for a year and a half, you've been telling them they won't listen. Yeah, they won't listen. Okay. Well, I always tell people that the great thing about this is that every gym has the correct apparatus for this individual. It's called the door. If they truly are not going to listen, that's where they need to go. But I will tell you probably 99% of the time that is not the case. I will ask coaches, have you ever asked yourself, is the person capable of what you're asking of them? If they don't have enough mobility, say in their hips, to open up and hit the style squat you want, it doesn't matter if I say anything. It doesn't matter what I say to them. If it's not a mobility thing, let's say it's a musculature thing. Let's say they're quad dominant and I'm asking a wide stance squat from them and they have weak hamstrings. Their knees are going to cave in to keep it into their quads. So everything that we do when it comes to technique is you have to have optimal mobility for each movement if you want to have optimal technique, and then you have to have optimal strength, okay, to maintain position. All right. So when I'm looking at someone in technique, if I see their knees cave in, I'm going to give them a cue to try to cue that out of them, and then I'll see the way their body responds. Also, though, there's some little things I've learned over the years. If someone comes down, their knees stay out perfectly all the way down, and when they go to come up, their knees come in, it's not a mobility issue because their knees tracked perfectly all the way through range of motion. It is obviously a strength issue. If I see their knees cave in on the way down, say their knees stay out halfway, and halfway their knees come in, and on the way back, their knees go back out in the same exact spot. Now I know they're listening to me as a coach. They're not physically capable of attaining the position I want them to attain. So the way I look at it is if you were ever in high school or anything, or junior high, and you were in a class and you were kind of lost on the subject, like I'm finding a guy like Jim and hiding behind him, and hopefully the teacher doesn't see me and ask me a question, because nobody likes getting asked a question when they don't know the answer, right? So I hated that when it was free. I don't want to pay for that. Okay, I'm not paying a monthly fee to feel horrible about what I do every week I'm in the gym. Okay, so our special exercise, our accessory movements, which is roughly 80% of our volume, they're single joint movements. You don't get as injured as frequently off of those based off of compound movements, but we can pick our accessories so that we can optimize the structure of the athlete and the movement quality of the athlete, so it makes it much easier for the coach to do their job and cue things out of the athlete. If they've been in the system long enough, now if they're in for a month and they've had bad mobility issues or like imbalances, it's not going to get sorted in a month. But if they've been in the system long enough, they will have all the attributes of movement quality they need, and then it's easy for the coach to give those cues. So when we're looking at CrossFit, I wanted to just do the same thing with CrossFit. So the way we lay out programming in this is designed to do the same thing. Now, the accessories, a lot of them are some things that we use for powerlifting, but there's accessories, and some of them are crossed over for Olympic lifting. There's some specifically for that. There are some accessories we put in for gymnastics, because your demands for gymnastics are a little different. And, we have to take into consideration all the different types of movements that an athlete does, and therefore make some adjustments for that. And like an example would be with special exercises, typically people think about special exercises like dumbbell, barbell, things like that, right? But we also do gymnastic style movements for accessories as well. Okay? So we can bring in these other things, use them as accessories, but also touch upon them to work on that skill set a little more frequently. When we first started this years ago, when I first started teaching courses for CrossFit, people weren't doing accessory movements. They weren't competitors weren't doing additional strength work on top of the CrossFit that they were doing. And I can tell you, throughout the years, I've worked with female games champions, male games champions, teens, masters, and the individuals, like we'll say pull-ups, for example, like butterfly pull-ups. The people who have the most strict dead hang pull-ups have the best feeling shoulders doing those and stay on the bar longer, get back on the bar quicker. They hold together much better. I've always found the people who are the weakest at strict dead hang pull-ups were the ones who complain about their shoulders from doing butterfly pull-ups. Okay, so we have to fortify ourselves for what we're doing and to optimize our movement. So basically, the system's designed to work upon every strength that could be utilized and needs to be utilized in CrossFit, where there's no other system in the world doing that right now. Okay, that's kind of the gist of it.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, good.
We've had great success with that. Even like our own coaches, they've been doing. We recycled the same program for over 2 years. Didn't change a thing much at all, and people that show up consistently were still hitting gains and hitting PRs. It's a couple things. If you're consistent and you have the intensity, but also on the accessories, like I could program some level of accessories for an athlete, but if it doesn't address the root cause issue, then it's not nearly as effective. An easy example I always give is if you can't finish the range of motion on a bench press, it's a good chance it's your triceps, right? So if I'm always having people do a lot of dumbbell bench and half reps for your chest and back, then I'm not really hitting the root cause. So doing the accessories is obviously key. The next level is, hey, talk to a coach and say, hey, man, what's the root cause of my issue? Like you were talking about your knees caving in from either mobility or strength. Having a coach, having the knowledge where they can dissect the issue and then work with the athlete to address the root cause, then you have a even better chance of working with that athlete, improving the athlete within the overall conjugate system. Then two, with all the changes, CrossFit's constantly variable. Conjugate means constantly changing, right? So a lot less injuries if you're doing different things. You don't have that repetitive use injury quite as often.
No, you're correct about that. It really helps with repetitive motion injuries. And also, there's the fact that you have to introduce 15% or more new exercises a year for athletes to learn new movements at the highest rate possible. That is great for CrossFit because CrossFit's always introducing new movements at the games. They're always trying to come up with new apparatuses, new movements. And the person who has seen the most and adapted the most will obviously pick up new movement quicker. And the other thing too that I find when you're talking about people who are just not athletes or people who just want to be in really good shape and be healthy is that CrossFit's kind of the difficulty about CrossFit for a class is that most people never sign on for the type of intensity that CrossFit's going to bring. And so they maybe sign up for a month or they buy a 3 month package, and after their first week, they're like, whoa, well, I signed up for 3 months, I'll be done in 3 months. But then after 3 months, they're in the best shape of their life. They are now starting to recover from it, and they're like, okay, well, I'll give it another 3 months. And they do awesome, and they are in the best shape of their life. They do great, they're excited, they have fun there, but it's still not quite their personality. I've found that a great way to retain clients is by constantly having variation. Once the variation runs out and they start repeating it too many times,
Sure.
that's when you start to have an issue. It's kind of like the thing when I mean, the first time I did Fran, that's how I was introduced to CrossFit. It's like, hey, do Fran, and it's like 21, 15, 9, and you're going, okay, so what else did you guys do after that? And they're like, no, that's it. Like, we have an hour class, right? Yep. And so I'm kind of like, well, okay. But then I did it, as hard and fast as I could, and I was like, whoa, like that was spicy. That was a lot different than what I thought it was going to be.
Sure.
And it's kind of the same thing when you get people who start CrossFit. You're like, so that's all I have to do for the whole hour. And they're all geeked up until they do it. They're like, whoa. Well, it's kind of the same thing. The more variation we give them, they don't know how hard it's going to be or what it's going to feel like until it's too late, which is great. It's perfect for everybody. Louis always used to say this. He's like, he wouldn't tell us what we were going to do. Like, you go to Westside, and then it's like, okay, here's what you're going to do. And you had no clue what was going to happen that day, right? And he'd tell you what to do. And it worked perfect. And one of the things he's like, look, can you imagine, like, if you're in school, you're a freshman, and the biggest kid in the school, a senior who beats up everybody, walks up to you at lunchtime and goes, at the end of school, like, your ass is mine. You know, you're stressing all day long about it. Your stomach's hurting, you're sweating, you're exhausted. If you're someone who's never fought before, you're going to be worn out before the fight starts. You would be much better off if the guy just started swinging right then and there and you just reacted. It'd be better just to
True.
get it over with. You would have your best chance. You wouldn't be worn out, fatigued. You wouldn't be overthinking it. Be perfect, right? It's kind of the same thing with CrossFit. And then it's the same thing with what we're doing in CrossFit is that we can keep people there longer because it's already too late once they're into it. But once they're into that workout, it's over and they feel accomplished. They're happy they did it. They might not have wanted to do it or might not have done it if they saw it on a board. They might not have shown up that day. But when they're done, they're glad they did it. You know?
No, no argument. The mindset piece where if you do get bored, because every human person wants some variety,
Hmm.
even if the routine is consistently working,
Yeah.
there is that component where, hey, I'm bored, I don't want to do the same thing again. So it does pique their interest a little bit more, makes it a little more new and exciting. And if it keeps them coming, next thing you know, 2 and 3 more years go by, and they're
Hmm.
still healthy. They're still healthy. They're still in great shape, which is
Yeah.
ultimately most times the overall goal.
And for a lot of people, you guys might not know this. I don't know whoever's watching how much they know Jim. Jim's a great guy. Wrote a great book, but he's also a big background too with like strongman events. And so to give you an idea on that, we like to touch upon strongman movements. If you have a games competitor, we have to touch upon them each week. But strongman movements, there's not a ton of longevity in strongman, and they can beat you up very quick.
True.
So, something we might do as an example, instead of say, since we have to touch elements pretty often enough to be efficient with them, which, anybody who's done strongman before, it's like get good at stones because you work them all the time, and then don't do them for 6 months and see what happens. Trust me, you're not going to be great at stones again. You'll know the technique, you have to get back there, but it's something you actually have to touch and do. So what we might do, and what I've done with strongman competitors and would do with CrossFit athletes, is I could do a 3 week speed wave instead of the deadlift. I can do percentages of stone. I can do a 70% weight stone, a 75%, 80% stone, and we can do that for speed work. It's not so heavy it beats you up, but if you accelerate at zero point 0.8 meters to 1 meter per second, you are producing the same amount of force of that 1 rep max that you would have with a stone, but you're not going to get as beat up. And I know it's, the bigger stones often get bigger. Sometimes they don't, depending on how they're made, but they often get bigger. And there's some little things like that. But when I've done that with CrossFit athletes, they stay much healthier, much longer, but they touch the implements frequently enough to be good at it.
Right.
And so, like I said, I Westside Barbells produced and did phenomenal things, and a lot of people get just um, they get like laser focused, like powerlifting. Louis Simmons is a strength coach, not just a powerlifting coach. He was a strength coach, and like Louis always used to say, is he's like, um, I had a powerlifting team to show people that I knew how to get people strong. I'm supposed to be a strength coach. Shouldn't a strength coach be able to demonstrate and show you that they can actually improve these qualities in an athlete? And so, don't be mistaken, it's not just for powerlifting. A lot of times people will make remarks about other sports, and let's look at Olympic lifting. Well, the conjugate sequence system came from Russia. Russia was a phenomenal powerhouse and still a great country for Olympic lifting. China didn't produce any gold medalists until they sent their 2 top athletes to train in Russia. After they trained in Russia, they won. Both those guys won gold medals in the next Olympics. They then retired and became the coaches for the Chinese national team. So, this type of training has a broad spectrum, and it can be utilized any way that it's needed. It literally covers every type of strength you could utilize. We just have to, as a strength coach, you have to decipher what are the most important pieces and what is the frequency of those pieces that you need to plug in.
One thing that was also helpful when talking to Justin earlier today is that each sport has a different season. CrossFit's season starts with the Open and then evolves from there. And then obviously, like every other sport, the vast majority does they don't evolve, they don't progress through the sport. But in talking with Justin, he talked about how you guys do even wave in a mesocycle the approach to the Open, and then there's a bodybuilding piece, and then a strength piece, and another Olympic piece. He mentions that he finishes with snatches, a snatch piece at the end of the year. So it allows your body to recover in some ways, and then adapt in others, and then keeps you fresh and evolving all year long.
Yeah, and when you look at the Open, regionals, and different things like this, well, I know they don't have like the typical regionals anymore, but when you look at these, they are different. Like Open is different than the games, right? It is different. So there has to be those adjustments in there. Plus, when we're dealing with classes, people are all different stages, so they have to touch upon those stages and experience them and see where those things are at, which definitely, helps them. But, and again, it keeps with, we need the mental state to be there. One thing I learned at Westside is knowledge is number one, atmosphere is number two. And what I tell people is that really good, phenomenally laid out programming builds atmosphere. And what I mean by that, I've always used this example, like, let's say Justin comes to my gym. Don't know Justin. He comes into my gym, and we're doing a dynamic effort upper day. And after our speed bench, we get into some strict dead hang pull-ups. And we do 4 sets, and he does 14 on the first 2 sets and 13 on the last 2 sets. So he has decent muscular endurance. I'm like, okay, that's good. And now for the next so many weeks, like, okay, so next week we're going to do chest to bar, strict chest to bar. The week after that, we're going to do L-sit, max rep, strict dead hang pull-ups. Then we're going to do ring pull-ups, and then we're going to do max band tension for sets of 8. 25 pounds around his waist the next week for max reps. We're going to constantly change the type of tension, the type of weight, the rep schemes, and different types of, pull-up variations. So let's say 12 weeks later, we come back to strict body weight, dead hang pull-ups like the first week he was in. So the week before that, on week 11, we did a mini band around his neck, and he did 18 pull-ups. So 4 more than he did the first time he came in with resistance now versus just body weight, right? So he will do what 99% of athletes will do that I've ever trained. He'll come in and go, and I'm like, hey, we have strict dead hang today, just like your first week you were in here. So, so he's like, awesome, man. Like, I just did 4 more reps of band tension. Like, so how many am I going to get? Even if I knew how many he was going to get, I'm not going to tell him. Just on the outside chance, everybody's a little different. And now I know, like with Justin's like military background, stuff like that, I know that and I know him personally, and I know he's a mentally tough individual. He might get one or two more reps than I expect. I don't want to set a tone that mentally holds him back, so I'm not going to ever say what that is. But what Justin knows is he's going to hit a PR for sure. He just doesn't know by how much. Now, let's say you have a class of 25 people, and 20 out of the 25 people are all in the same situation. Don't you think that the atmosphere in that's going to be electrifying when 20 out of 25 people are like, I'm going to hit a PR today, and I just can't wait to see what it is.
That was the big selling point when I talked about max effort days or
Mm-hmm.
max effort anything, whether you're trying to evolve your accessory score number. That if I knew every time I came in on one of those days that
Mm-hmm.
there's a 90+%, and 90 is a great number for our gym, and we were never
Mm-hmm.
quite there, but still in the 80s, right? If we're in the 80+% where the whole
Mm-hmm.
gym's hitting a PR that day, that's got to be fun. You got to
Mm-hmm.
think, do I want to go or not? Well, I know it's Monday. I always hit a PR on Monday, so I
Mm-hmm.
might as well go.
Yep. Well, so
It
that's
is a
okay.
literal zoo at our gym on max effort days. We got a PR bell and people are going fucking nuts. And you're talking about like competitors, obviously, down to the soccer moms, down to the 70-year
Mm-hmm.
old, 80-year old grandmas that are in there. They're all ringing the bells, slamming bars, and having a fucking great time. And to Shane's point, it's all about the atmosphere was built off the programming. People get used to winning. And Shane and I were talking about this the other day, and it was kind of like pissing me off. I had a member that was complaining to me because they didn't hit a PR on one of their workouts. And Shane goes, "Well, that person probably spent 3 years at their other gym not getting any PRs, and now they're at your gym, and they're pissed off that they didn't hit a PR every single week. They missed 1 week out of 52 weeks. They missed 1 week on a
Mm-hmm.
PR, and they're pissed. And they
Mm-hmm.
probably didn't PR for 3 years at their other gym. So that's showing the expectation and the environment is growing because of the programming itself. You know what I mean?
Oh, good, Jim.
Well, there's in addition to the programming, it's up to the coach, and the athlete has to be somewhat complicit
Mm-hmm.
in that when you're talking about 80% of your work isn't the actual main lift, you got to be diligent
Mm-hmm.
at PRing the small little things,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's your mobility work, your recovery and resting, or even your amount of food intake.
Mm-hmm.
But then also the work itself, the accessories. And if you PR there, then the main lifts or your main WOD time, it's basically a foregone conclusion
Mm-hmm.
if you do the work. Because if Shane's programming something perfect for me, and I don't really put that much effort into it, well,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really get the bang for the buck as well. So there's still got to be there still has to be a
Mm-hmm.
level of effort to
Yes.
hit all the little PRs along the
Mm-hmm.
way.
You're correct. There needs to be that effort. The nice thing about it is they're getting rewarded more frequently. So more people in the class start going more intense. The new people see everybody else and they try to keep up because they're like, well, that's how it's done. I need to do what they're doing. If nobody in the gym's training intense, everybody comes in and just does it to the same effect. It's interesting because Justin and I have had a talk about this before. And I said, when I took my team to the games, they got second at the games. The first year there, and none of the athletes had been to the games before. One of them had never even been to regionals or the Open before. So I took a bunch of younger people, and we got second at the games. And they would train really hard in the CrossFit workouts. I mean, they would train hard. I didn't have to say a word to them about intensity. And then I walk out in one day and I see them doing accessory movements, and they're talking and doing like tricep movements and having a conversation. And I asked what they're doing. They're like, well, we're doing the accessories. And the funny things that dawned on me, what they first were introduced to in training was like going to a global gym and working out with their friends with low intensity. So when I gave them accessories, it reminded them of those times, and they just went to do this low intensity output. And then I explained to him, like, this head needs to be just as intense as your Metcons, right? Just as intense. It's everything you have. This is, 80% of your volume and training for the strength portion of it. This is what's going to change the way you move, your movement quality, optimize your leverages. And so then they started pushing that real hard, and their numbers took off. But I was blown away, and I've heard this from multiple people before. Had is like, yeah, man, I was watching my team, and I saw them doing accessories, and they just acted like a couple gym bros in the gym who are just having fun, hanging out, talking, It's just so funny that you can have this correlation. You just fall into this rhythm. So Jim's right. You have to have people have to have a buy-in. And that's where you get your few key people who know train hard and the right coaches, get them pushing so that way when new people come in, they just take off with that group. And once that intensity is there, it's huge. But to Jim's point, what I've always told people is, we have very high success rate out of my gym in hitting PRs. And my world record holders in lifting would usually miss they would miss a PR about once a year lower body, once a year upper body. If they were the top people that I had who produced a lot of world records, is about every once a year and a half. Okay, so if they ever, whenever they did miss a record, they would all PR the rest of their accessories. They would just miss a main lift. And then we get upset about, well, I didn't go up this week. It's like, well, you've gone up for the last year, okay? But that was accessory at PR. So next time you come back to this lift, you're going to hit a PR because your accessories are going to go up again, and you've gotten stronger, just not strong enough to add that 5 pounds to that squat, deadlift, or bench. But you did get stronger because you had 4 accessories in a midline movement, and you hit PRs on all of them. So now you hit PRs on all of those. It's just a little bit more to take you over the edge to add that onto that compound lift. And then one last component to that, and you guys are talking about this. When I went to Westside Barbell and I started training the Westside method, I was like anybody else. I pushed really hard, but I didn't have a plan. So if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. And don't get me wrong, I had plans. They just weren't good ones. Um, and so I'd get strong and I'd go up and down, up and down, up and down. When I went to Westside Barbell, I knew it was someplace special. Don't get me wrong. You could feel it in the atmosphere. The knowledge base was phenomenal. But at that time, also when I first went there, I wasn't the coach I am now, so I was ready for certain information, but I wasn't ready for all of it. So some of it sounded kind of out there. And I remember one day I was on my way to the gym. I'm at the gas station, and this guy starts talking to me. He's like, "Hey man, how much you bench?" Which like the typical comment you get if you're lifting long enough. And this is the first time I ever thought like this. I remember I was on my way to the gym, and I'm like, "Man, I wish he would have asked me. I wish he would have asked me. I ran into him after I went to the gym because it was going to go up." And I realized I've never thought like that before. My thought process has changed because of the success level of having with this training, that I am that excited, that I'm that sure that I'm gonna increase my bench when I go in. But I used to not increase at that fast of rate of speed, and I was naturally a strong person, so I should have. I had some gifts in that area, but I wasn't consistent in my increases, so I never thought like that until I finally was consistent in those increases. And that did change my thought process, and it did change even the atmosphere for me because I was then bringing something to atmosphere because now I want to push that really hard, give back to the people who gave that to me, and give back to anybody new who was coming in.
Talk about how your approach in the programming builds people's engines.
Okay. So when you hit an absolute strength, okay, so there's quite a few things we do. One, absolute strength, that's our max. When you increase your absolute strength, the percentage of the weights that you lift in competition get lower, okay? So there's one component to that. When we do our speed work, anybody who's done speed work the way we do it with 30-second rest periods and going on 30 seconds, when you do when you get all your sets in basically 12 to 14 minutes in your squats and deadlifts, people are exhausted. I've had guys who are in the NFL. I had three linemen, 2 guys that played in the Super Bowl, and they were just like, after 12 minutes, they were like, that's what it feels like at halftime in a Super Bowl game.
Right.
We were working speed work, but they're like conditioning wise, they're like, whoa, like that hit, pretty good. So what I found with my people when they go to regionals or the games is I've had an athlete that went to the games, and at regionals she had to do a handstand push-up workout, and she's like, the speed work, she was first in that workout. She goes, that is what did it for me on the handstand push-ups because it created a rhythm at speed, and she was snapping them out. She didn't spend as much time in the handstand position, and it set her up for success. So we can take our repetition schemes for our accessories and we utilize them in a lot of different manners. Once we have our strength where we need to be, we can add repetitions and get more muscular endurance. We do finishers where we have 100, 200 reps on things at the end, which goes along great for CrossFit. And what I try to tell people is when you think about your engine, there's a couple different components to it. One, we do 1 rep maxes, we do doubles and triples for speed work, we do repetitions in our accessories or anywhere from 5 reps to 200 reps. We have PRs on all of these. And in CrossFit, sometimes there's workouts where the movements are put together, you've never done them in that order, and so you don't know how your body's necessarily going to react. And I try to tell people, how do you know how you're going to game plan your workout when you don't touch all these different rep schemes? When we touch all these different rep schemes, it allows us to learn. Here's what my body feels like. Here's when I start to get a pump. Here's when I start to fail range of motion. When you're doing 200 reps on an accessory movement, you'll learn exactly when you blow up and really, are starting to fight, or you have to take a few second break and keep going. So that helps. But here's a big one that people don't think about. When you look at the dynamic effort phase, when we're doing dynamic work and we're doing band tension, okay, pulling down, this trains your body to store greater amounts of kinetic energy and allows you to store kinetic energy for longer periods of time. Okay, so kinetic energy is it's like free energy, right? It's not going to cost you in a workout. The more kinetic energy you can store in your tendons, the more efficient you're going to move through your workout, the less actually output you need to keep pace. So if I can get you to store greater amounts of kinetic energy and hold on to that kinetic energy for longer periods of time, which we have done studies with universities and had kinetic energy storage for up to almost 4 times that of Division I athletes, then what that means is every repetition we do, we're storing kinetic energy, and we're using less muscular contraction and less energy out of our body. We're not burning through as much of our fuel sources. We aren't using the tissue as much. They're not using as much oxygen. Your tendon doesn't require oxygen like muscles do, right? So while it's not, that component itself isn't that you have a higher VO2 max. It's not that your lung capacities got bigger or anything like that. It is the ability to move and use less energy for the same amount of output.
Right.
Okay.
Not working as hard, still have the same amount of output, like you said. Yep.
Correct. So, yeah, we want to push VO2 max. Yes, we want to hit different, maybe do lactic threshold training and things like that. But it's not just about our heart and lungs. It is also about the efficiency of our body. So if you store kinetic energy at a greater level, which you will if you train with, if you train with, say, bands, accommodating resistance, and you do speed work, you will increase your stored kinetic energy. It will happen. It's a guaranteed thing to happen. The other thing that you have to look at, too, is if you are not using accommodating resistance, you're not optimizing your output all the way through range of motion. So why we use accommodating resistance is to offset your leverage improvement. So anybody out there who's done say a set of 8 on squats, it's like that first third to half of the squat is rough, and in the second half you kind of get to relax a little bit, especially the top 1/3, 1/4. It's almost like you get to relax before you have to go back to the hole again and start working, right? When you're using accommodating resistance, it should see the same level of difficulty all the way through range of motion, right? Because the weight is coming on harder and harder, tension or weight, as you go through range. So your body's producing the same amount of force all the way through range of motion, a similar amount of force. So physics has proven that you cannot produce maximum force against minimal weight. We're always trying to optimize the force velocity curve. So that's why, Jim's a big guy, right? I hand him a baseball, he might be able to wing that baseball pretty good. But if I wad up a piece of paper and hand it to him and say, I want you to throw this as fast as you can, as far as you can, it's not going to be impressive. Not because Jim's weak, not because he doesn't have good leverages for it, simply because it doesn't weigh enough for him to get enough force behind it. Okay? So that's the same thing's happening when you are not using accommodating resistance when you get to the second half of your lift. So we are going to adjust your nervous system for the firing pattern that we're utilizing with accommodating resistance so that we can optimize our output as long as humanly possible through range of motion. It's not perfect, it's not 100% all the way through, but it carries on a lot farther. And I want to use one example before we get on anything next, is I call it like the batting donut effect. You know, you look at someone, they put a batting donut on, they swing it for like 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden their bat speed's higher and they hit the ball farther, right? Bat feels real light for them, they have good, bat speed. And what I try to tell people is that didn't make you stronger in 30 seconds. If it did, I would have batting donut outfits. I would wear them all day long, everywhere I went. I'd be the strongest
Right.
human alive, right? What it did is your nervous system changed its firing pattern of the muscle to optimize the swing of the bat with that new implement at the end. When you take it off, the firing pattern's still the same. It is temporary. When you go back up, you have to do it again. It's the same thing that happens with speed work. For a while, it is temporary. But if you train the system long enough, and if you've ever seen any guys or girls who lifted at Westside Barbell or any powerlifters from my gym, you will see it because they're insanely explosive. They move weight completely different than anybody else does. And that's because they were in the system long enough to make these permanent effects, to change the firing pattern and to produce force for a longer period of time through range of motion. And they have the ability to store greater amounts of kinetic energy. So after they've been in the system for an extended period of time, it becomes a more permanent effect unless you train it out of the individual.
Which is the reason like I like you having speed work week in and week out so you don't lose that. You can see the force production in wall balls pretty easily, or any kind of plyometrics. Again, it comes down to the coach and the athlete to execute. So I've seen people where you're doing speed work and you get like a 1 to 2 minute rest, and I'm like, that's not it. Or you'll have like a 100 rep finisher, and then they're using a light band, so they're using like 10 rounds at 10 with that band. And I'm like, no, you go until it hurts, and you keep going. Then you go get a little rest, and you gotta finish at the 100 reps. And if it's 100, I usually say do 102, everything you do plus 2, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but it's that piece where are you executing the plan? Because if you're brand new to lifting and you get a men's fitness magazine, you're going to get better if you're trying really hard. And 'cause I remember the example you gave us when I think you're giving a seminar out in Dubai, and a guy comes up to you and goes, "Hey, I'm taking this level of gear and steroids, but I'm not getting any stronger. How much more should I take?" And you go, "Well, are you lifting?" And you're like, "Well, a couple times a week I do a
All of
little
it.
bit."
Take all of it. No.
Right, right. So I'm like, and you like, yeah, you can have all the steroids or gear that you want, but if you're not really doing the work, it doesn't matter, right? So again, it's there's the art and the science, and then there's the effort.
Yeah. Like I said, execution is huge. In understanding what that execution looks like, okay? Because what I find in a gym is a lot of times people don't really understand what intensity should be, and that's part of what's made CrossFit good, because it's funny that people are like, I'm not competitive, and all of a sudden the buzzer goes off and they go actually like a madman, you
Here we
know?
go.
Yep. And so that's great. But we need to explain, have examples, show what we want. But then there's also the aspect of when I was young, I always had hoped it was whoever trained the hardest would win. And whenever I was in the gym, I out-trained anybody. But I got hurt. I would get stronger, I'd get weaker, I'd get hurt, I'd go back and forth all the time. So in the long run, I wasn't making consistent gains over a long period of time. So I really didn't increase nearly as much strength as I should have. And people want to go to a failure. And I try to tell people, we don't train to failure. I think it's asinine to teach yourself how to be good at failing. I don't know why anybody would do that. I want to get good at being very successful in what I do. So I want to know where my limits are. So if Jim hits a 800-pound squat and he goes, I want to go 850, and he misses it. Was he an 810 squatter, an 820, an 830, an 840? We don't know. What we want to do is hit the biggest weight we are capable of that day. And if it's a day where we don't go for a PR just to go for a PR. If it's an off day, we hit the biggest weight we're capable of that day.
That day, right.
Correct. Because in competition, you can have an off day and still win. But if you don't understand what that looks like for you and what you're capable of and what you can actually do when you feel like that, you're probably not going to win because you can't optimize yourself because you have no experience in it still. Okay? And then the other component is that it is execution, which means you recover from weights that you make faster than weights that you miss. If you talk to someone who goes 9 for 9 in a powerlifting meet, they usually feel pretty good on Monday. Talk to someone who goes 3 for 9. You won't see them for a few weeks in the gym. They're going to say they felt like they got hit by a truck or a bus and they feel absolutely horrible. So I'm not going to do that to myself because I don't have time for that. What you have to look at is this. This is an example. And people don't look at things in a time component and they don't realize how fast they can take time away from themselves. If you compete in a powerlifting meet or any sport, and let's say you compete 4 times a year, and you push yourself so hard in training and so hard in the meet that you need 3 weeks to recover after the meet before you get back into the gym and train.
Mm.
And then I get back in on Monday. So you do that 4 times a year, okay? In 4 years, you've lost 48 weeks of progress, almost a year of progress over me. So if we do the exact same training and you execute yours poorly and I execute mine perfectly, I have 48 weeks in 4 years of advancement over you. Think of 10 years, 15 years of competing, what that looks like.
Hell yeah. And I think that's a really good segue into how this whole thing comes about when we're talking about programming for elite athletes, right? And this is where the programming starts, because Shane says it all the time. Technology trickles down, not up. We're not programming workouts for 100-pound squatters. We're programming workouts for 800-pound squatters. We're not programming workouts necessarily for the CrossFit Open. We're programming workouts to get the games athletes to the best or the highest capacity that they can be. And as a byproduct, everybody downstream gets fitter, right? If we were only programming for that 100-pound squatter, or we were only programming to help Sally get off the couch when she's 80 years old, then everybody else upstream would suffer as a byproduct of that. So what that kind of looks like is, to Shane's point, it's optimal. And when we first start working with, higher level athletes, there's a little bit of an echo. I don't know if somebody's hot micing.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. All right. So we start working with higher level athletes, and Shane's probably heard this a lot. They'll look at the program and be like, "Holy cow, I have to do all that." Well, what happens is they start to feel better by doing all of that, because like Shane said, we're doing a lot of that single joint, what they would consider bodybuilding style movements, and they start to adapt to those things because they're not pushing those things as hard as they were pushing their metcons. To Shane's point. And it's a constant battle with those athletes. It's like going back and telling them, like, hey, you need to push these accessories harder. You need to continue to go up on those weights, and making sure that they understand the plan and then going forward. So our plan is real simple. Wave tops, obviously. Mondays we do a max effort lower. Typically Shane would do a max effort upper with his power lifters. So we flipped that so that we could share the equipment as needed with the athletes there. But it's going to be also, largely dependent on how you want to run it in your gym. This is how we do it. Max effort lower on Mondays. We have a max effort lift, and then we try to take that main movement and we break that down into the actual workout so that the athletes can get some repetitions with that. If we have time for it in the class portion, then there's obviously some accessories and finishers there. A lot of those things are going to be baked into what we call Grind, the competitor program. On Tuesday, the theme is going to be a dynamic effort upper, where athletes are obviously working on increasing speed strength, and then optimal leverages through that with the accessories and things of that nature. As far as the CrossFit or the Metcon program, which you would see in the class, that's designed around a 60-minute class cycle, right? Where the coaches are briefing it, they're warming them up, they're going through skills and drills, and then they're going through the workout and the cool down. There we will have a Metcon, and then typically some accessories and finishers. On Wednesday, we like to do Olympic style weightlifting, typically in complexes, because it's a little more. I want to say with Olympic weightlifting, if you only snatched and cleaned and jerked, you would be in the same problem if you were only squatting, right? If you were only doing a back squat. So instead of just doing a back squat, we have we switch up the bars. We go chains, bands. We go to boxes. We go wide stance. Different depths and different ranges of motion on those things. Starting points, maybe from the pins. Those things. It gets a little bit harder when you start talking about some of these CrossFit style movements like Olympic lifting. If you're only programming clean and jerk. And no other variations of that. So you'll see a lot of complexes on there. Typically those complexes will bleed down into the actual workout itself. On Thursday, it's going to be a dynamic effort lower, and there is going to be typically where you see some of the more high-skilled gymnastics movements bleeding over into the workout, and there's going to be some supplementary gymnastics blocks for our competitors as well. Sprinkled in throughout the week, you're going to see secondarily outside of the main movement and then the accessory work, you're going to see a supplementary metcon for the competitors, not for the GPP athletes. And then on Friday, we go into a max effort upper, and that's where the obviously we go into a max effort upper lift or something upper body focus as we're running this split, and then making sure that the athletes are getting what they need for their given sport, which in this case is going to be CrossFit. So you'll see some, typically ring dips, some kind of handstand push-ups, some kind of upper body pressing, pulling capacity, and that nature. And then on Saturdays, I like to do the long grinder, partner style workouts. It's always fun. It gets the community going, gets them excited. And, also on those workouts, it's for me, I think more so, it's often a nice reset because when you put something for time, people are ready to run their heads into a brick wall. If you have a 24-minute, 25-minute AMRAP, people know exactly what pace they're going to be going at, which is going to be slow. And it's a good opportunity for athletes to just move through some ranges of motion, get out any kind of soreness, stiffness that they need before they jump into the next week. And that's wave tops. We have some other things that we've learned over years of doing this, because to Jim's point, if the coaches aren't executing it the way that it's designed to be, it can be difficult. So supplementary to that, we have coaches notes and coaches videos that we've started like trickling down so that the athletes can see those, especially in Wodify, where we just kind of drop those videos right into the warm-ups. It's been helpful for other gyms. They actually suggested that we do something like that so the athletes can see the movements and they can understand that what we're trying to get after for the day there. So there's a lot of the backside coaches development as well. There's an entire lesson plan for the coaches, teaches them how to execute the class if they spend any time at all going through those notes. They should be set up for success. And then, the last thing is, you both kind of touched on it a little bit, the accessories and the finish work. It's going to be the bread and butter of this thing. You can Metcon your life away and run your head into brick walls, but if you're not taking care of your joints and you're not taking care of your body and pushing those things, one, you're going to stall, but two, you're most likely going to get burned out and get injured. So when I'm looking at accessory work, and this is something that, as you progress as a coach, you start to see things, and, Shane's opened my eyes on a lot of these things, but it's like I'm watching somebody squat and I see where their squat breaks down. Maybe we're doing a front squat and they start to round their upper back as they come up. Maybe their knees dive in. I know when we go to the accessories later what I want to prioritize with that athlete. So although we have a game plan kind of laid out for you, what's important for coaches and athletes to understand is if we're going to go into an accessory or a finisher movement, I want Shane to have as much energy and as much focus on the thing that's going to give him the most bang for his buck. I may have him, do some arched around back good mornings, high rep finisher, instead of doing some GHRs or something after that front squat. And then I might have him do the GHRs later after he finishes that. Even though it's not written that way, I might just flip those things around a little bit because I want to have that athlete, put the most attention and the most focus and energy on the things that they need the most. And that's just where it comes down to, just understanding what these exercises are there for, why we have them there in the first place, and what does your athlete need to go to the next level. It's all in there. And that's the beautiful thing about this program is we didn't leave a single stone unturned, from swimming to running to machine work to strongman elements to Olympic lifting. Anecdotally with the gyms that we've had on board, that's the one thing that nobody complains about is everybody's getting stronger, everybody's getting fitter. There's little nuanced things like I don't upload a video properly, or I have some spelling errors in something and I confuse some people. Those are the little things, but I've never heard anybody say, man, we're just getting too strong out here.
And to give you guys an example, I want you guys to kind of I had a guy, and I told my coaches like, hey, if you have anybody that looks like they could be a competitor, let me know. And when I had my CrossFit gym open, and they didn't tell me about one guy. I had a guy that and he's on record for saying this because like when he went to the games, he was interviewed, and they're like, so how do you train? He's like, well, I train at CrossFit Conjugate, and they were talking about like what he does outside that. He goes, I only do programming. He literally did class programming only and made it to the games as an individual. You know, which I mean, like open, like that's rough. Like I mean, the guy's training 4 or 5 days a week, but he was doing one workout, 1 hour class. That is it. And I remember they were making a big deal because like seriously, he's like, yeah, I don't do any other. He didn't have time for it. And the thing that Justin said, and here's how I want you guys to think about this, because he said, hey, like sometimes you have to adjust order of what you're doing. What I found is like roughly, not exactly, but for classes, everybody's usually one or the other. It's like almost half the class has one weakness, the other half has the other weakness. Like you say bench press, half of them it's their back, the other half it's their triceps. When you look at a squat or deadlift, it's like half of them it's their hamstrings, the other half could be spinal erectors, or glutes or whatever. So when we put those together, what we do usually is let's say for an example, we'd have like face down side to sides for your spinal erectors, and then we do like even say like a stiff leg deadlifts for your hamstrings, right? Just generic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the half of the class that their hamstrings are weak, and they're going to start on the stiff legs. The half that the spinal erectors are weak, they're going to start off on the side to sides. And then when they're done with them, they're going to switch. So you don't need twice as much equipment. You need half as much equipment. And then whatever your weakness is, you're going to start on that movement first when you have the most energy and you can bring the most intensity to that movement. And then if I do a finisher, a lot of times what I like to do is, let's say hamstrings are your weakness and you start with stiff legs. Well, I might do 100 band leg curls. The person whose spinal erectors are weak, their finisher will be arched around backs with a band. And they're going to hit a finisher that is their weakness. And what that does is it kind of forces your coaches to have to pay attention, because they have to be the ones who say, here, you're in this group, here, you're in this group. And then they also start to teach the individuals what they need and where their strengths and weaknesses are. And so that gives them a knowledge base. I believe every gym should be an educational facility. Everybody trains harder. Everybody puts more effort in if the juice is worth the squeeze. If they believe in you as a coach, they will push harder. They will get better results. I've seen it over and over again. And, kind of the big thing I would say to start too is if you've never done this type of training before, maybe do a month, just your coaches do a month on their own, and maybe the week before they start on a Saturday, do like a little mini seminar for the clients and say, hey, you can bring +1, bring a friend. This way you might get more people who join too, who may want to do a CrossFit, as well. But you can tell them, hey, here's the changes we're gonna make. Here's why we're making them. So this is the way they're kind of bought in. And maybe you guys can go over like box squat or some different things that aren't typically seen in gyms. And so they know how to do it. They know how to set it up, and they execute it. So then when they join the class, it takes a load off the coaches. Coaches have done a month of the programming, so they kind of know what to expect. But one thing that I'd say helped in our gym, and I tell coaches to do this, is when you go over the whiteboard, don't just talk and go over the whiteboard. Shoot questions. All right, we're using a safety squat bar today. Why do we use a safety squat bar? And ask somebody. One person, safe shoulders. Another person, works my spinal erector, so I'm less likely to drop my chest. There's all these different components. And then what happens when you start asking questions? Everybody starts paying attention.
Oh yeah.
Saves the coaches time at the whiteboard. They don't have to repeat themselves. They don't have people talking. They have to get to quiet down so they can get the class going. And what you really, really want is for the individuals to pay attention and start to learn themselves and start to learn why they're doing the system. What I've had in the past is I've had some of my clients say this. Oh, I met with a friend of mine. They do CrossFit, but they live like 40 minutes away, and we met for lunch. I haven't seen them in a few months, and they were shocked in the way I looked, and so we started talking about it. And after a while talking, they're like, "Are you coaching there or something?" No, why? Like, you're just so knowledgeable about it. You know, that's what we want.
For years, I would say I would like for my athletes to be smarter than the neighboring gym's coaches. That
100%.
way, one, they wouldn't want to leave,
Mm-hmm.
and two, they're probably just overall getting better. If they
Mm-hmm.
go through like, and I've been guilty of this, where hey, I'm going to shut my brain off and kind of be a zombie, let someone else lead.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever I'm more engaged,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to execute what the coach had instructed me to do. My improvement is always going to be better. Then I'm usually having a better time that way too.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And we're all here for the
That's
same reason. And no matter if you're a non-competitive gym, a competitive gym, it doesn't really matter. We're here to improve people's quality of life. The
Yes.
better they understand what they need, the better their quality of life is, the happier they are, the more appreciative they're going to be of you, which makes you enjoy what you're doing better. It's just a synergetic thing that needs to happen for a gym to be successful, and for a coach to want to be a coach for life, it needs to go that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you guys answered all my questions. What I was looking for.
Cool.
It was mostly a refresher or reminder course for me. So because I've been
Mm,
following Shane and Westside, and I'm near Jeremy Hartman too. He's
mm,
a conjugate
mm.
coach as well. But just around enough folks that I've learned
Mm.
a lot from you guys over time. And it's always a lot of really really good reminders.
And if anybody's ever out in the area, go see Jim. He has a phenomenal gym, well outfitted, great people out there. Check it out. It's always nice to stop into gyms that are done well. You never know what you're going to pick up that you can help take back to your gym and help improve people, or just have a fun workout for yourself, you know?
For sure, for sure.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and last thing, just leave us with this for anybody who might still be listening is what we really offer at the end of the day is knowledge and experience, right? Shane has been doing this for what 40 plus years. Been
Hey
doing it
now.
for a long time myself. Um, so we were obviously able to put our collective heads together and come up with a pretty phenomenal product. But here's what's been really cool about this is now we're not just seeing it on our gyms, we're seeing it on a global scale, and we're
Hmm.
finding out what works and what doesn't at a faster rate than anybody could ever imagine. And this thing is pretty dialed in now at this point, and the results speak for themselves in literally any sport you could imagine. Shane always said it, like Lou wanted Shane to break the system, right? And we've been trying to break the system, and the system works, and the system works. We're going to continue to try to evolve it and make sure that we're getting the most out of it as we go through it. But the bottom line is the system works, and it's minor tweaks that Shane's done over the years, like switching from a 9x1 or a 12x1 into a 9x3 rather, because it gives the athletes just a little bit more time to strain. That's had tremendous carryover, not only for power lifters, but also for CrossFitters when they're doing their speed work. So these little things that we've gotten collectively and then globally are really just invaluable tools through this programming. And the coaches get all that. They get all that inside the notes with the videos and the lessons plans. And that's the starting point. So the hope is that coaches evolve at a faster rate because where they're starting at is so much higher than where we started at.
You know,
So yeah, you know what I mean?
one other thing I would say, one of my coaches had pushed for some different programming, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, I know what I'm doing is works and it works well, but I thought if I ever get hung up with the thought that I'm really there and I've arrived and not much else to learn, then that's a really bad spot for me.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, why don't I research a couple different options? And I was happy to see that you guys were one of the options when I went and looked. And I thought, I already know quite a bit about the conjugate approach, been doing it for a while, but there's got to be a ton more that I'm missing. So why don't I follow this for a year or two and just pick up more knowledge? And so I was happy just to make the adjustment just because of the fact I like to learn more.
And I'll
So
say this
I
too.
was
This
pretty
is
happy
what
about
Shane
it.
and I do. We do this full time.
Right.
So what this really allows you as the gym owner and the coaches to do is worry about what matters most with driving their business, right?
Right.
So you as the gym owner are not spending, 15 hours a week or whatever it is, programming, writing lessons plans, making sure everything's buttoned up. You can then create SOPs and you could go into things that aren't working in your business. You can hunt in different insurance companies and try to save money there. You can,
Yeah.
call those people or teach somebody how to call people so that you're not stuck on the phone when you're calling back leads. It really frees you up about 15 hours a week. And if you take that 15 hours and you invest it back into your business, the amount of money that you're paying for this program is irrelevant because it's making money.
You know, Jim's a smart guy. He's a good trainer, good coach. Understands the mentality, understands training, And just because you're great at something, it's just nice to have another set of eyes once in a while. And I used to bounce stuff off of Louis back and forth. I remember one time we were sitting at a meet, and he goes, you made some changes. I see it in your deadlifters." Like, yeah. He's like, "Man, they're blowing up. What are you doing?" And I told him, and I remember it was the way I added volume to speed work, but I did it in a certain way. And it was funny because there was two different ways I was thinking about doing it. And I decided to go with the way that I decided to go with. And he goes, "Yeah, I just made an adjustment." And he told me what he was doing, and it was the other way I was thinking about doing it. Because we both had the same understanding of what we saw that we needed to improve or where an improvement could be made. And it was one of those two ways to get there. But it was so like when he told me, I'm like, he had just started. I'm like, awesome. I'm like, let me know how it goes. Because I didn't know which one was going to be better. I chose the one I thought, or maybe at the time, maybe I thought it would just be easier to do in my gym or whatever. But having people who have the same thought processes and understanding and knowledge is great, but we're all individuals and we all have a different recipe to get there. And you might find like, hey, what I was doing was great, but this actually takes less time or easier setup, or my coaches understand it better, or the people just enjoy it more, whatever it is.
Right.
And that's kind of the huge thing about it, you know?
Awesome. So
So
I'm
thank
excited
you for coming on here, Jim. We greatly appreciate it. And it's always good to see you and talk to you. We should
for
do this
sure.
more often, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I was
So
excited to partner up with you guys. I'm really excited about it.
cool. Well, thank you.
You're
Well,
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
yeah. Well, let's wrap it up there, gents.
You
All
have a
right.
good night, Jim. We'll talk to you soon, Justin. All right.